Juan turned to the medical officers. She was supposed to be in preparation for isolation. Why is she here? She overrode the containment field, one officer explained, sounding bewildered. We don't understand how. Nara approached Ta-hyun slowly. Human emotional patterns create different neural pathways, she explained. I can think in ways no Velari has before. Your proposal has merit. The council would never approve deliberate sharing. Juan objected. The council doesn't need to approve a pilot program, Nara countered. As chief diplomat, I have authority to establish cultural exchange protocols without prior approval. Ta-hyun felt a surge of hope through their connection. What are you suggesting? A small group. Volunteers from both species. A controlled environment where we can study the effects of sharing and create guidelines for wider implementation. She turned to Juan. Not contamination. Evolution. Juan's markings pulsed in what Ta-hyun now recognized as the Velari equivalent of a thoughtful frown. The risks are less than the potential benefits, Nara finished. I stand as living proof. Yes, I am changed, but I am not diminished. Her eyes, the permanent mixture of Velari gold and human brown, fixed on Juan. I understand both perspectives now. I can translate concepts between our species in ways no one else can. 6 months later, Ta-hyun stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Human Velari Cultural Exchange Center. The small facility orbited Nexus 9, connected by a slender docking tube. Through the viewport, he could see ships from both worlds approaching the station, the first group of volunteers for what was now officially called the Symbiosis Program. Nara joined him at the viewport, her skin now a healthy blue again, though her markings retained their unique patterns. Having second thoughts? She asked. No, Ta-hyun said, but I am wondering what will become. Not just you and me, but our species. Something new, she replied. That's what frightened my people at first, the unknown. Velari evolved to find safety in connection and predictability. Humans evolved to thrive in chaos and change. And together. Nara smiled, placing her hand on the viewport as the first transport shuttle docked. Together we may become something greater than either of us imagined possible. Behind them, the doors slid open as the first human and Velari volunteers entered the facility. Young diplomats, scientists, artists, all willing to take the risk of permanent connection for the chance to understand another species completely. Do you remember what you said when we first met? Ta-hyun asked quietly. That old Velari saying about one night and hearts never belonging to anyone else. I remember, Nara said. It wasn't meant romantically, as humans might interpret it. It was a biological warning about neural bonding. Her markings pulsed in what Ta-hyun now recognized as amusement. Though I suppose there's a certain poetry to it now. As they turned to greet the new arrivals, Ta-hyun reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. What had begun as a diplomatic crisis had transformed into the most significant cross-species exchange in known galactic history. The Human Velari Accord, as it was formally known, had already attracted interest from other species curious about this new form of deep cultural understanding. And at its center stood 2 individuals forever changed by their connection, neither fully human nor fully Velari, but something new. A first step toward a future where understanding crossed the boundaries of biology and evolution. One night, Ta-hyun murmured, and everything changes. For the better, Nara added, her eyes shifting to a bright, hopeful gold as they walked forward together to greet the future. Earth Central is demanding explanations, he said without preamble. How did a routine first contact turn into a diplomatic crisis in less than 3 days? Ta-hyun continued staring out the viewport. They're afraid of us, Admiral. Not our technology or our weapons. They fear what we are. And what exactly are we that frightens a species capable of shared consciousness and empathic connection? Emotional complexity, Ta-hyun said simply. The human capacity for feeling is unlike anything they've encountered. Our emotions are stronger, more varied, more contradictory than those of other species they've connected with. Jai-ho sighed, pouring himself a drink from the small cabinet near the desk. And this permanent bond you formed with their diplomat, can you still sense her? Tae-hyun nodded. She's afraid. Confused. The Velari don't have a protocol for this situation because it's never happened before. Do you have any idea what they plan to do with her? Isolation. They'll sever her connection to their collective to prevent what they see as contamination. Tae-hyun finally turned to face the admiral. I need to see her before we leave. Out of the question. They've made it clear. Sir, with respect, they're about to effectively execute her because she carries human thought patterns. We can't just leave her to that fate. The admiral studied him for a long moment. You're not thinking like a diplomat right now, Commander. No, sir. I'm thinking like a human being who's connected to another sentient mind that's crying out for help. Tae-hyun's voice grew stronger. And I believe there's a diplomatic solution they haven't considered. 30 minutes later, Tae-hyun stood at the entrance to the Velari vessel, his diplomatic credentials displayed on a small holographic badge. 2 Velari guards regarded him with obvious suspicion, their skin markings pulsing rapidly. I request an audience with Chief Diplomat Hwan, Tae-hyun said formally. I have a proposal that may benefit both our species. The guards exchanged glances, their eyes shifting colors in what Tae-hyun now recognized as silent communication. Finally, one nodded and gestured for him to follow. The interior of the Velari ship was unlike any human vessel. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with patterns similar to those on Velari skin. The air carried the familiar scent of sea salt and electricity. As they walked, Tae-hyun felt Nera's presence growing stronger. She was nearby. Hwan waited in what appeared to be a command center, surrounded by displays showing star charts and station schematics. His deep blue skin looked almost black in the dim lighting. Commander Park, he said coldly, I thought we had concluded our business. I'm here to propose an alternative to isolation for Nera, Tae-hyun said, getting straight to the point. Hwan's markings pulsed once, sharply. There is no alternative. Her neural patterns have been permanently altered. She cannot return to the collective without risking contamination. What if contamination is exactly what both our species need? The statement was met with silence. Several other Velari in the room stopped what they were doing to stare at him. Explain, Hwan finally said. The Velari evolved empathic abilities as a survival mechanism after disaster nearly destroyed your civilization, Tae-hyun said. Humans evolved stubborn individualism and creativity for the same reason. Both approaches worked. Both our species survived. But both approaches have limitations. Tae-hyun stepped closer to Hwan. What if instead of seeing this connection as a threat, we recognize it as an opportunity? A new evolutionary step for both species. You propose deliberate contamination. Hwan sounded horrified. I propose controlled cultural exchange, Tae-hyun corrected. Not random sharing, but carefully selected diplomats and scholars from both species, creating a bridge of understanding that neither of us could achieve alone. Before Hwan could respond, a door at the far end of the room slid open. Nara entered, flanked by 2 medical officers. Her appearance shocked Tae-hyun. Her skin had grown paler, almost translucent, and the markings on her face now formed patterns he had never seen on other Velari. I heard you, she said simply, looking at Tae-hyun. Not just with my ears. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for, Jai-ho said, pacing the small meeting room. If humans can form these permanent connections with Velari, it gives us a unique position in galactic politics. Sir, with respect, I don't think we should view this as a tactical advantage, Tae-hyun replied. Nera is experiencing a profound identity crisis. The Velari see this as a threat to their cultural integrity. Of course they do, Jai-ho said dismissively. Any species that relies on shared consciousness would fear individual variation. But we need to consider Earth's interests here. The afternoon session was canceled without explanation. Through his lingering connection to Nera, Tae-hyun sensed her distress growing. He could feel her struggling to explain her experience to the Velari medical officers, how human emotions had a different quality, a different intensity than what Velari were accustomed to. By evening, rumors spread through the station. The Velari delegation had requested emergency transport back to their homeworld. The talks were to be suspended indefinitely. Tai-hyun found himself cornered by a young Velari aide in the corridor outside his quarters. Unlike the others, her skin was a pale blue, almost white. "You're the human who shared with Nara," she said without introduction. Her markings pulsed with what he now recognized as curiosity rather than hostility. "Yes, she's being examined by our elders. They fear contamination." The aide leaned closer. "But some of us are curious. What was it like to share with a human?" "I don't think I should discuss." "Please," she interrupted. "There are those among us who believe connection with other species is our future, not our downfall. Nara was one of us." Was. The aide's markings dimmed. "The elders are considering severing her connection to the collective. They fear her altered patterns could spread if she remains linked to our shared consciousness." Tai-hyun felt sick. From his sharing with Nara, he understood what this meant, a fate worse than death for a Velari. To exist as an isolated consciousness, cut off from the comforting background presence of her people. "Where is she now?" he asked urgently. "In the medical bay. But you won't be allowed to see her." Tai-hyun didn't wait to hear more. He hurried through the station's corridors toward the medical section, using his diplomatic credentials to pass through security checkpoints. As he approached the Velari medical bay, he could feel Nara's presence more strongly, her fear and confusion radiating through their lingering connection. Outside the medical bay, he found Juan and two other elder Velari in heated discussion. Their skin markings pulsed in patterns so rapid they seemed to blur. "Commander Park," Juan said coldly when he noticed him. "This area is restricted to Velari personnel. I need to see Nara." "Impossible. She is being prepared for isolation and transport." Tai-hyun stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know what you're planning. Severing her from the collective would be cruel and unnecessary." Juan's eyes widened slightly. "How could you know?" He stopped, then his expression hardened. "The connection works both ways. You've gained insight into our ways just as she has gained human perspective." "Please," Tai-hyun said, "let me speak with her. There may be another solution." "There is no solution," Juan replied flatly. "Only containment. The human capacity for emotion is too intense, too chaotic. If Nara remains connected to the collective with these new neural patterns, it could disrupt our entire society." As they argued, a message arrived from Earth Central on Tai-hyun's communicator. Admiral Jaho's expression was grave as he delivered the news. "The Velari High Council has formally requested an immediate end to the diplomatic mission. All human personnel are to prepare for departure within 6 hours." The first official contact between humans and Velari was ending in failure, and Nara would pay the price for their experiment in understanding. Tai-hyun stood at the viewport in the Concordia's ready room, watching as technicians prepared the ship for departure. The humans had been given 6 hours to leave Nexus 9, ending what had begun as a promising diplomatic mission in uncomfortable haste. Through the station's transparent walls, he could see the sleek Velari vessel on the opposite docking arm being loaded with equipment. And somewhere on that ship was Nara, being prepared for isolation from her people's collective consciousness. The door slid open behind him. Admiral Jaho entered, his expression grim. As Tai-hyun made his way back to his quarters, he felt changed in ways he couldn't fully articulate. He carried fragments of Velari consciousness within him now, echoes of their collective memory, their way of processing reality. And somehow, he knew that Nara carried pieces of his humanity with her as well. What neither of them yet understood was that some connections, once made, cannot be unmade, and that their sharing had just altered the course of both their species' futures. Morning arrived at Nexus 9 with the artificial lighting gradually brightening to simulate dawn. Tai-hyun had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, fragments of Velari memories floated through his mind. Underwater cities glowing with bioluminescence, the sensation of communicating through pulses of light rather than words, the comforting background hum of collective consciousness. He dressed carefully in his formal diplomatic uniform, trying to focus on the day ahead. The sharing with Nara had been more profound than he'd anticipated. More troubling was the lingering connection he still felt, a faint awareness of her emotional state, even now, across the station. When he arrived at the conference chamber, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The Velari delegation was huddled in quiet conversation, their skin markings pulsing in patterns he now recognized as indicating distress. Nara stood slightly apart from them, her posture rigid. "Commander Park," she greeted him formally, but her voice lacked its usual melodic quality. "I trust you rested well." Before he could answer, Admiral Jiho pulled him aside. "What happened last night?" The Velari requested an urgent communication with Earth Central at dawn. "They're talking about cutting the talks short." "I'm not sure," Taehyun said, though the growing knot in his stomach suggested otherwise. "Let me speak with Nara." The morning session began with a noticeable tension. Where yesterday's talks had flowed smoothly, today each point seemed to require careful negotiation. Taehyun found himself anticipating Velari concerns before they were voiced, a skill he attributed to his new awareness of their thought patterns. More striking was Nara's behavior. She spoke less than before, letting other delegates take the lead. When she did contribute, her insights showed an unusual understanding of human motivations, as if she were translating Velari concepts through a human lens. During the midday recess, Taehyun finally managed to speak with her alone in a small garden area designed for private conversations. "Something's wrong," he said simply. "I can feel it. Literally feel it, somehow." Nara's eyes, now a permanent mixture of gold and brown, met his. The sharing didn't conclude as it should have. She touched her temple. The neural connection was supposed to dissolve completely once physical contact ended. "But with you, with humans, something different happened." "Different how?" "A permanent imprint," she explained. "Your emotional patterns, your way of processing reality, they've created pathways in my neural structure that didn't exist before. I am changed." Taehyun felt a chill. "Is it dangerous?" "Not dangerous, but unprecedented." She gestured to her eyes. "These physical changes are merely external signs of deeper alterations. I now partially perceive reality through a human lens as well as a Velari one." Before Taehyun could respond, an older Velari diplomat named Hwan approached them. His skin was a deeper blue than Nara's, his markings more angular. His eyes shifted rapidly between colors as he looked between them. "Nara, the medical officer requests your presence," he said, then turned to Taehyun with barely concealed hostility. "Commander, I believe we need to discuss what has transpired." "Hwan, please," Nara began, but he cut her off with a gesture. "The situation is serious. The connection hasn't merely lingered, it's stabilizing." He turned to Taehyun. "Do you understand what that means, human? No species has ever created a permanent neural bond with a Velari before. The implications are concerning." "I didn't intend," Taehyun started. "Intentions are irrelevant," Hwan interrupted. "Results are what matter. And the result is that Nara now carries human neural patterns. She thinks partially as you do. She feels as you do." His markings pulsed rapidly. "Our medical officer believes the change is irreversible." After Nara left reluctantly with Hwan, Taehyun sought out Admiral Jiho to explain the situation. The Admiral's reaction was not what he expected. He was a child on Velara, swimming through vast underwater forests, communicating through pulses of light and color with his podmates. He felt the constant comfort of the collective consciousness, not a hive mind that erased individuality, but a supporting network that was always present in the background of awareness. He experienced Nara's calling to diplomacy, her unusual fascination with other species, her ability to understand perspectives different from the Velari norm. He felt her loneliness as she traveled among alien cultures, always connected to her people through their psychic bond, but physically apart. And she was experiencing his life in turn. His childhood in the megacity of New Seoul, surrounded by millions, yet often feeling alone. The competitive drive that had pushed him to excel, to rise through the ranks of Earth's diplomatic court. The mixture of pride and fear he carried as humanity's representative to the stars. The sharing deepened. Taehyun was now experiencing the pivotal moment in Velari history, the cosmic disaster that had changed everything. A nearby star had flared unexpectedly, bombarding their oceanic world with radiation. Millions died as the upper layers of the ocean boiled away. The survivors retreated to the deepest trenches, evolving rapidly under intense pressure, their natural empathic abilities expanding into something more as a desperate survival mechanism. In that moment of species-wide trauma, the Velari collective consciousness had been born, a psychic network connecting all survivors, allowing them to coordinate without language, to share resources, to rebuild. Simultaneously, Nara experienced humanity's great traumas, the climate wars, the resource collapse, the desperate years before the restoration. She felt the stubborn refusal to surrender that characterized humans at their core. Where Velari had evolved connection in response to disaster, humans had evolved extraordinary individual resilience. Time lost all meaning as they exchanged not just memories but entire worldviews. Taehyun understood now why Velari society had no concept of lies. Their constant connection made deception nearly impossible among their own kind. Nara grasped the human capacity for self-deception, the ability to believe one thing while doing another, a contradiction that would be impossible in Velari consciousness. The sharing moved beyond personal and species history into deeper realms of thought and feeling. Taehyun experienced the Velari understanding of death, not as an end, but as a rejoining with the collective memory. Nara felt the human fear of mortality and the creative fire it ignited, the desperate drive to create meaning in a finite existence. Throughout it all, something unexpected was happening. The connection wasn't proceeding as Nara had experienced before. Human consciousness was different, more fragmented, more intense in its emotional range. Each human emotion seemed to burn brighter, cut deeper than those of other species she had shared with. As the hours passed, physical reality occasionally intruded on their awareness. The distant sound of the station's systems, the gentle pulse of the bioluminescent plants, the cool water against their skin. But these were mere distractions from the profound exchange taking place at a deeper level. When awareness finally returned fully to the room, Taehyun could see that significant time had passed. The lighting cycle of the station had changed to its night setting. The plants along the walls had shifted their glow pattern to match. Yet something was different. The connection hadn't completely faded. He could still sense echoes of Nara's presence in his mind. Her emotional responses, fragments of her thoughts. Across from him, Nara looked shaken. Her skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality. The markings on her face were pulsing in an erratic pattern he now understood to indicate distress. Her eyes had settled into a color he had never seen in them before, a mixture of Velari gold and human brown. "What's wrong?" Taehyun asked, his voice hoarse from hours of disuse. Nara touched her chest, then her temples. The connection, it should have dissolved completely by now. Her voice carried a tremor. "Something is different. Your mind, human minds, they're not like anything we've encountered before." She carefully withdrew her hands from his, moving back from the pool. The tiny star creatures scattered, their light dimming. "I need to rest," she said, standing unsteadily. "And so do you. Tomorrow we'll need to speak about what this means." She slowly withdrew her hands from his. Yes, that was, she seemed to struggle for words, something he hadn't seen in the composed diplomat before. Intense. Taehyun finished for her. "Yes." She touched her chest, a gesture he now recognized as a Velari expression of deep emotional impact. Your species feels so deeply, so complexly. It's unlike anything I've experienced in sharing with other races. Ta-Hyun suddenly realized he could still sense echoes of her emotions, as if some connection persisted. Is it supposed to still feel like you're there, in my mind? Nara's expression changed to one of concern. No, the connection should fade completely once physical contact ends. She stood suddenly. I need to consult with our medical officer. This is unexpected. As she moved toward the door, she paused, looking back at him. Rest, Commander. Tomorrow will be different now. The door closed behind her, leaving Ta-Hyun alone with the stars and the strange new awareness that seemed to linger in his mind like the afterimage of a bright light. The echo of what it felt like to be Velari. Nara's private quarters aboard Nexus 9 looked nothing like what Ta-Hyun had expected. Instead of the sterile uniformity of the station's standard rooms, hers had been transformed into something organic and alive. Plants from her homeworld grew from specialized containers along the walls, their leaves and stems giving off a soft bioluminescent glow that pulsed in a slow rhythm. The air felt different too, slightly more humid, carrying scents of salt water and something sweet he couldn't identify. These are from the southern reefs of Velara, Nara explained, noticing his interest in the plants. They help me sleep away from home. Their light patterns match the tides. Ta-Hyun moved carefully through the room, aware that he was likely the first human to enter a Velari's personal space. They're beautiful. More than beautiful. They're connected. A single organism split into many parts. She gestured to the center of the room where a circular area had been cleared, cushions arranged on the floor around a shallow pool similar to the one from the observation deck, but larger. Like my people. The memory of their brief connection in the observation deck still lingered in Ta-Hyun's mind. That had just been a taste, Nara had explained, a surface-level connection to test compatibility. Tonight would be a complete sharing, something rarely offered to non-Velari. Should I be prepared for anything specific? Ta-Hyun asked, trying to mask his nervousness. Nara's skin markings pulsed more rapidly for a moment before settling back to their steady rhythm. Only that there are no secrets in full sharing. What you are, I will know. What I am, you will know. She gestured for him to sit across from her at the pool. Unlike the small basin from before, this pool was large enough that they could comfortably sit with legs crossed, knees almost touching at its edge. The water glowed with the same bioluminescence as the plants, and tiny creatures that resembled sea stars moved slowly across its surface. These help stabilize the connection, Nara explained, noticing his gaze. Living conduits, we call them. As they settled into position, Ta-Hyun felt the weight of what he was about to do. This went far beyond his diplomatic training. Yet something in him, curiosity, ambition, or perhaps something deeper, pushed him forward. Clear your mind as much as possible, Nara instructed. Don't force thoughts away. Just let them flow through you without attachment. She extended her hands across the pool, palms up, waiting. The markings on her arms seemed to swirl in anticipation. Ta-Hyun placed his hands in hers. The water felt cool against his wrists where they touched the surface. The tiny star creatures moved toward their joined hands, glowing brighter. Now look into my eyes and breathe with me, Nara said softly. Her eyes were shifting between colors more rapidly now, violet to blue to gold and back again. Ta-Hyun found it impossible to look away. Their breathing synchronized naturally, and with each breath, he felt a warmth spreading from their connected hands up his arms. The room began to fade around them. Unlike their first connection, which had felt like dissolving into mist, this was more like sinking, dropping slowly through layers of awareness into something deeper. The first sensation was one of expansion. Ta-Hyun felt as if his consciousness was stretching outward beyond the boundaries of his body. Simultaneously, He sensed Nera's presence, not as a separate entity, but as a different pattern within the same expanding field. Then came the memories. "It makes you interesting," Nera corrected. "And yes, potentially dangerous, but also potentially valuable as allies." She removed her finger from the water, letting the surface grow still again. "The sharing will help me understand how humans think, how you feel, how you see the universe, and I'll understand how Velari think and feel. Yes, it's a two-way connection. We will experience each other's memories, emotions, and perspectives. Nothing is hidden during sharing." Tai-hyun tensed slightly. "Nothing." Nera's eyes shifted to a gentle amber. "Are you concerned about state secrets, Commander, or personal ones?" "Both, I suppose. The sharing doesn't work that way. I won't be able to extract specific information you wish to keep private, but I will feel the emotions attached to your memories. Joy, pain, fear, hope." She paused. "It's more about understanding the shape of your mind than its contents." Tai-hyun considered this. His briefing had included strict protocols about information security, but nothing that covered this situation. "How does it work physically?" "Our nervous systems will form a temporary bond. It begins with touch." She extended her hands, palms up, across the small basin. "The water serves as a conductor for the initial connection. Once established, the sharing takes on a life of its own." Ta-hyun studied her hands, blue-skinned with delicate webbing between the fingers he hadn't noticed before. The markings on her arms seemed to pulse faster now. "Will it hurt?" "No. It can be overwhelming at first. Many describe it as similar to the moment of waking from a vivid dream, when for a brief second you aren't sure which reality is real." Her voice softened. "I will guide you through it." Taking a deep breath, Ta-hyun placed his hands in hers, feeling the cool water between their palms. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then a warm, tingling sensation began in his fingertips, spreading slowly up his arms. The room seemed to grow dimmer, the nebula outside brighter. "Relax," Nera whispered, her voice suddenly sounding as if it came from inside his own head, rather than across from him. "Don't fight it." The tingling reached his shoulders, then his chest. His heart began to beat faster. The room around them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling mist of colors similar to the nebula outside, but somehow more vivid, more alive. And then the memories began. He was swimming in a vast ocean, surrounded by structures that grew rather than were built. He felt the joy of mental connection with thousands of others, a constant comforting presence in the back of his mind. He experienced the terror of the great dying, when solar flares had boiled away much of their homeworld's oceans, forcing the Velari to adapt or perish. He felt the evolutionary leap that had transformed their species into something new, the development of their empathic abilities as a desperate survival mechanism in their darkest hour. Simultaneously, Nera was experiencing his memories. His childhood in New Seoul, playing in the reclaimed green spaces after the climate restoration. The pride and fear of being selected for the diplomatic corps. The crushing responsibility of representing an entire species to the galactic community. The complicated feelings toward Earth's military expansion, even as they preached peace. Hours passed like seconds. Entire lifetimes of experience flashed before them in moments. The borders between their minds grew blurry, then non-existent. For a time, neither was sure which memories belonged to whom. When awareness of the physical world finally returned, the nebula outside had shifted position. The station's rotation had brought a new section of space into view. Tai-hyun found himself still sitting across from Nera, their hands still connected over the now dark water basin. But everything felt different. The colors in the room seemed more vivid. The subtle sounds of the station's life support systems, which he had tuned out before, now registered as a kind of music. Most striking was Nera herself. Her skin markings were pulsing rapidly, almost frantically. Her eyes had changed to a color he had never seen before, a strange mixture of colors that seemed to shift between human brown and Velari violet. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse as if he hadn't used it in days. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Ta-Hyun said, breaking the silence. "Yes," Nara replied, but she wasn't looking at the nebula. Her eyes, now a deep gold color, were fixed on him. "Commander Park, there is much about humans that puzzles us. Your diplomatic files tell one story, but your emotional patterns suggest another." Ta-Hyun turned to face her fully. "What do you mean?" "Your species presents itself as peaceful explorers, yet I sense deep currents of something else. Not aggression exactly, but a kind of hunger, a restlessness." Her markings pulsed faster. "It's fascinating." "We are a complex people," Ta-Hyun admitted. "Our history is filled with both great kindness and terrible violence. We hope we've learned from our mistakes." Nara stepped closer. The scent of something like sea salt and electricity became stronger. "Perhaps there is a way to understand each other better, beyond these formal talks with their careful words and rehearsed positions." "What are you suggesting?" "Among the Villari, true diplomacy requires true understanding." Her voice lowered. "We have ways of sharing experiences directly, a temporary connection that allows a glimpse into another's perspective. It is both our most sacred tradition and our most useful diplomatic tool." Ta-Hyun felt his pulse quicken. "That wasn't mentioned in our briefings." "It wouldn't be. We offer it only to species we believe might be compatible." Her eyes shifted again, now a deep blue. "And humans, curiously, seem highly compatible." A warning flag raised in Ta-Hyun's mind. His security training had emphasized caution about any alien psychic contact, yet the diplomatic opportunity was too significant to dismiss. "What would this involve?" he asked carefully. "One night, one sharing of perspectives. No permanent effects, I assure you." She smiled. "Perhaps we could meet after tomorrow's sessions, somewhere less structured than this formal environment." Ta-Hyun hesitated, then nodded. "For the sake of better understanding between our peoples." As he turned to leave, Nara added softly, "Commander, there's an old Villari saying, 'One night with me, and your heart will never belong to anyone else.' I look forward to showing you what that truly means." The observation deck of Nexus 9 stood empty save for Ta-Hyun and Nara. The massive viewport curved around them, revealing the swirling cosmic ballet of the nebula that surrounded the station. Stars peeked through wisps of colored gas like distant lighthouses through fog. The room's lights had been dimmed, allowing the natural glow of space to fill the chamber. Ta-Hyun arrived precisely at the agreed time, finding Nara already there. She wore simpler attire now, a fitted bodice that seemed made of some organic material, with a soft blue glow emanating from beneath its surface. Her skin markings pulsed slowly, almost like a resting heartbeat. "You came," she said, turning from the viewport. Her eyes were a calm violet now, different from the intense azure they had been during their earlier meetings. "I said I would." Ta-Hyun had changed from his formal uniform into the standard black duty clothes that Earth diplomats wore during casual exchanges. "Though I admit, I'm still not entirely clear on what this sharing process involves." Nara gestured toward a small sitting area with cushions arranged in a circle. Between them sat a small basin of water that glowed with the same soft blue light as her clothing. "Please sit." When they were both settled, she continued, "Before we begin, I want you to understand the significance of what I'm offering. The sharing is not something we Villari do lightly." "I gathered as much," Ta-Hyun said. "Your fellow delegate seemed surprised when you suggested it." A slight smile crossed Nara's face. Surprise would be an understatement. Some were alarmed. Humans have a reputation in the galactic community. Not a good one, I take it. Let's say, complicated. You're seen as unpredictable. Most species evolve along predictable paths. Their development of technology, social structures, and connection to other species follows patterns we recognize. She dipped a finger into the glowing water, causing ripples to spread across its surface. Humans follow no such patterns. You develop unevenly. Your technology leaps forward in some areas while remaining primitive in others. Your social structures constantly reshape themselves. Ta-hyun watched the ripples in the basin. And that makes us dangerous. Commander Ta-hyun Park stood tall in the airlock corridor, adjusting his silver-trimmed uniform one final time as the hiss of pressurization filled his ears. The tension in his shoulders betrayed the calm expression he had practiced for hours before the mirror. As humanity's lead diplomat for this historic meeting, every gesture, every word would matter. "Breathe, Commander," came Admiral Jaho's steady voice through his earpiece. "The scanners show their delegation is already at the docking point. Remember your training." Ta-hyun nodded to himself. 6 months of intensive study on the Velari, everything Earth's intelligence had managed to gather about the blue-skinned empaths who had, until now, kept humanity at arm's length while dealing freely with other galactic species. The curved door of the Concordia slid open with a soft mechanical whir, revealing the gleaming central chamber of Nexus 9, the neutral space station where countless diplomatic first meetings had taken place over centuries. The air carried unfamiliar scents, something like ocean spray mixed with electric ozone. And there they stood, the Velari. 5 of them formed a perfect semicircle, their heights varying but their posture identical, straight-backed and formal. Their skin ranged from pale azure to deep cobalt, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with their breathing. Most striking were their eyes, large, with no visible pupils, only swirling colors that changed as Ta-hyun watched. The tallest stepped forward. Unlike the others dressed in flowing silver garments, she wore a fitted bodice of material that resembled mother-of-pearl over a simple dark blue skirt. The markings on her face formed symmetrical patterns that highlighted her angular features. When she moved, light seemed to ripple across her skin. "I am Nera," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that human vocal cords could never produce. "Chief Diplomat of the Velari Collective. We welcome the Earth delegation to Nexus 9. Ta-hyun bowed slightly. "Commander Ta-hyun Park of Earth's Diplomatic Corps. We are honored by this opportunity for our peoples to finally meet in person." As their eyes met, something unexpected happened. Her eyes, which had been a deep violet, suddenly shifted to a bright azure. The change was so dramatic that Ta-hyun momentarily lost his practiced next line. "Your emotional signature is interesting, Commander," Nera said, tilting her head slightly. "Very controlled on the surface, yet quite colorful beneath." Ta-hyun cleared his throat. "I was not aware our emotions were so visible to your people." A small smile touched Nera's lips. "Not visible. Felt. Though most species project their feelings like shouts, humans seem to whisper them. It is a refreshing change." The formal introductions continued as they moved toward the conference chambers. Behind them, crew members from both ships began the careful dance of unloading provisions and setting up temporary quarters. This was to be a week-long preliminary meeting, the first step toward possible human integration into the wider galactic community. Inside the grand meeting hall, with its walls of transparent aluminum looking out into the star-filled void, the real work began. Star charts appeared on holographic displays. Trade routes were discussed. The limits of human technology were politely probed. Throughout it all, Ta-hyun noticed Nera watching him with unusual interest, not just during his presentations, but during breaks when she might have been consulting with her own team. Her eyes would find him across the room, their color shifting subtly each time. By late afternoon, both sides had shared enough basic information to establish a foundation. It had gone better than expected. The Velari seemed genuinely interested in human perspectives, asking questions about Earth cultures and adaptations to different environments. "Your species has remarkable resilience," Nera commented as they reviewed humanity's rapid expansion to Mars and the Jovian moons. "Most take centuries to achieve what you've done in decades." "Necessity drives innovation," Ta-hyun replied. "Our home planet faced challenges that forced us to look outward. Yet you've managed without the benefits of psychic connections or unified consciousness like many advanced species develop, another Valere named Dai observed. Perhaps that is what makes them unique, Nara said thoughtfully. They've achieved cooperation without sacrificing individuality. As the formal sessions ended for the day, Ta Hyun found himself alone with Nara in the observation lounge. The station had rotated, bringing the swirling colors of the nearby nebula into view, a cosmic light show of purples, blues, and golds.